Okay, long-term reason is that we in the United States are on track for a massive dollar failure in the long run, that we can't possibly pay our debts, and therefore we will default at some time in the future. And the most likely method of default is well underway, as those of you around the world are watching us print $4 trillion in 2010. We printed $2 trillion already this year. The House is likely to print another $3 trillion right off the bat when Biden gets in. And the GDP of America is only $18 to $20 trillion a year. So we're talking about adding 25% more just paper into the system than we're actually producing, even in terms of sales, not to mention wealth. The result of that is very predictable, and that is a devaluation of the buying power of the U.S. dollar. And the problem with that, for those of you who are living outside the United States, or actually really importantly for those of you living inside the United States, because we rarely think about how the dollar stacks up against the Swiss franc or something like that. Those currencies are already appreciating against the dollar fairly significantly compared to just a couple of years ago. And they will eventually get to a point, if this continues, they will reach a point, they being the central banks in Europe, Japan, China, around the world, where they just simply don't want to trade in dollars anymore, because if you're holding dollars in the central bank, those dollars are depreciating at a rate which makes it difficult to justify holding them. And if that happens, somebody is going to go to a gold standard. That's it. Nobody's going to go to a different currency, because there's no reason to trust the Europeans any more than you should have trusted the Americans or the Chinese or the Japanese in terms of using the advantage of being the world's reserve currency and simply printing money to pay their bills, which is what the United States has done to the distress of everybody who's believing in the dollar. And so it's not going to be another currency. It'll be gold. I don't think there's any other choice. It's not going to be Bitcoin. Nobody's going to trust a bunch of digits in some world computer named Yoshi or something.
I think that's a big claim, that it's going to go back to gold somehow rather than a different currency. But regardless, how does that get us to investing in the stock market or in anything else?
I mean, if it doesn't jump out at you immediately that there'd be a real problem in investing, if that happens, then we need to dive into that a little bit, because the biggest issue with this currency change over time is that inflation, which is, as you're devaluing the currency, you're inflating the cost of goods, right? It costs more and more of that currency to buy something, and the unions will demand more and more of that currency to work, or they'll strike. And it costs more and more money to buy a foreign good if those foreign currencies aren't depreciating as well. Mm-hmm. So, ultimately it could be $1 million to buy a Mercedes. And what would that do to Mercedes? It could be, $150,000 to buy an inexpensive Japanese car. What would that do to the Japanese car markets? So you really have to understand the impact of inflation on investing. It's dramatic and it's terrible. In some markets that we can point to, inflation destroyed the stock market for 20 years. The rate of return from 1965 until 1983 in the United States stock market, a time of enormous inflation as we went off the gold standard, was zero. The 20-year zero return. So not counting dividends, but effectively, given that there was inflation at a very high rate, at the end of the 70s, the U.S. Treasury notes, the 30-year, ballpark 1981 to 84, it was pushing toward 15% returns. The 30-year. Right now, it's at 2.
Okay. So okay,
impact.
Let's just from the beginning. So long-term reason to start thinking about investing, why investing is so important right now. relates to potential currency devaluation of the dollar, potentially getting some countries going to the gold standard, maybe the US, maybe others, potentially, you don't think this is likely, but potentially another country becoming the reserve currency of the world, and high inflation, lots of negative consequences for the money we hold. And the investing part of that is...
Well, if we get the 70s again, then those of you who are just sitting in the stock market in a broad diversified fund doing exactly what they tell you to do will have a disaster. You'll be in a position.
That was your point with the market getting
market
net
goes
zero.
Sideways. While the market's going sideways, zero appreciation in your dollar. So you put in $100,000 in the middle 1960s, and at the end of the 70s decade, you have $100,000. The problem is it only buys $50,000 worth of stuff. So you went backwards with your buying power dramatically, and that would massively affect your life if you're a retiree. It would affect your life no matter what you're doing, because that big hole doesn't get filled up later as you're investing. You lost half of that money in terms of buying power. So Whereas Warren Buffett made billions during the 70s. That was probably his best era as an investor. And the reason for that is because as the market starts to recognize that there are serious structural problems with the currency, then it gets volatile. It starts to really move around. The market went from 1,000 on the Dow peak in 1965 down 40 to 50%, I think 15 times in the next 15 years. I mean, it was just like banging down, maybe 30% down or something, but 30 to 50. I think 10 to 15 times. You just look it up on a chart and you can see it going up and down like a yo-yo. And so if you have some sense of understanding when things are on sale and when they're not, this is a time when you can Rule 1 type investors just crushed the market in that environment. So it's
that's the long-term reason.
That's the long-term reason.
What's the short-term reason?
Okay, the short-term reason is that we are going to see, as a result of this election, we are going to see some dramatic changes in fiscal policy and in tariffs with China and interactions with all of our neighbors. All of those things are going to create a lot of short-term volatility. So even as we start into this, we've seen immediately the market took off like a scared rabbit straight up. Now it's leveled out. And we'll see as a result of the corona. We had some phenomenal news on the coronavirus here just yesterday.
With the vaccines.
And if you're a Trump conspiracy fan, this is like really feeding the fire, because they came out with this, both the Eli Lilly antibody vaccine and...
Oh, well, that one's not a vaccine. That's
what's it called?
Antibody cocktail to try to produce antibodies faster in your body once you've got the virus.
You guys, if you enjoyed this video and you feel it was valuable in teaching you more about how to invest, hit the like button and please share the video with your friends. And if you want more investing content, subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the button on the screen. We got a free gift for you. Thanks again for watching.